again, football fans, and welcome to another episode of Miners Live. I am your host, head coach and general manager of the Sacramento Miners, Mr. Kris Dunn. Glad to be with you guys. I know it's been a little bit of a on-again, off-again relationship that you've had with me over the last couple of weeks, and for that, I apologize. I have been not so well, extremely sick with the flu for over 2 weeks now. So trying to do as best I can, but really appreciate you guys sticking with it and hanging out with me tonight, as we do have, once again, RFL all night. We got the doubleheader action tonight, 2 games for you guys this evening. So yeah, lots to talk about. And perhaps most exciting is we have a new addition to the ranks of head coach in the RFL. So we'll get into that a little bit more. I'll actually be bringing him on. For those of you that aren't aware, spoiler alert there, I'll be bringing on Coach Hodge, who is the newest member of the family, and he will be taking over for the DC Marshals. So just to give you guys a little quick rundown of what to expect here tonight, we got the trade deadline approaching. Again, the trade deadline is week 8. And we are already into week 7. So we are in the thick of week 7 right now. So we've got, between now and the end of next week, basically, is the trade deadline. I believe you have through the last game of week 8. So once there is an advance from week 8 to week 9, there is no longer any trades that can be made. So basically, for all intents and purpose, that puts the actual trade deadline date at next Saturday. So that would be March 8th, possibly March 7th, again, depending on when the advance is. If the advance ends up on Friday night, that would be the 7th. Saturday, that would be the 8th. So we are looking at March 7th or 8th is going to be the RFL trade deadline. Again, week 8 is the trade deadline. So I say that, and we'll get into Hodge and the Marshals and what they're going to look like moving forward. I'll talk about some injuries, some top performers, and I'll even tease up the awards odds as far as most valuable player. So at the beginning of the year, you saw Coach Forbes put out a list of players and odds for players to win the MVP. I'm going to kind of look at those and give you my thoughts on those, and then I believe next week on the show, live on the show, we will have updated MVP odds. So we'll kind of talk about what they were at the beginning of the year. And then next week, I believe, I'm trying to get confirmation from Forbes, but I believe next week on the show, I will have, I know for a fact next week on the show, I will have the updated odds. I'm trying to also coordinate to have Forbes come on and discuss with me as well. And then also love it or shove it. So we've got some opinions from you guys in the community. You may or may not have seen, I threw out a couple poll questions in the chat earlier, about an hour and a half ago now. And that's what I'm going to do moving forward. So I know a lot of you guys like the love it or shove it, and I apologize that it's not a more consistent element of the show. And for that, I apologize. Sometimes it's just difficult because I want you guys to provide an opinion, but when I put you on the spot, it's kind of hard to just look at your comments in the chat. So I think this is a much better way for me to go about love it or shove it. And so what I'll do moving forward is I will put those love it or shove it poll comments in the RFL general chat, and then you guys can actually vote on them. That way we can look at your votes and you're actually providing input in your opinion for the show. So again, the trade deadline is approaching. So I know that you guys are probably familiar with me and familiar with this show and familiar with my stance on certain things. And there are a few hills that I will always die on. And one of those hills is properly running a franchise, right? And understanding your franchise. And every franchise is different. And not just that, every season is different, right? Like the way that you run your franchise for the 2025 season can be completely different than how you run it for the 2026 season. And that's normal. You shouldn't feel like I don't understand what my team is doing. I don't understand what, the GM is doing. All of that is normal. Just look at myself. Look at the Sacramento Miners. 3 years in a row, we won the division. That season, I was running the franchise completely different than how I'm basically running it this season. Because this season, I don't feel like we're going to win the division. It's going to be an extremely uphill battle for us to win the division. We still can, but it's an uphill battle. And as you saw with the previous trade, Buck Ulbrich, obviously a mainstay in Sacramento, arguably the biggest. If you were to make a Mount Rushmore of Sacramento Miners players, I think Buck Ulbrich is on that. He's 100% on the Mount Rushmore of the Sacramento Miners. And now he's gone. Right? And so there's a lot of other teams out there that I feel like between now and March 7th or 8th, whatever it might be, have to have those conversations and identify where they are and what they're doing. And so I don't really have to go that deep into it, but you guys can clearly look at the standings, right? So just real quick, I'm going to pull up Neon and I'm going to look at the standings. And so let me share my screen here with you and pull this up. And you should be able to see this. Okay. So you guys should be able to see that. Let me know in the chats. Can you guys actually read that? Is that visible enough for you? Or is it really small? I can't tell if it's too small for you guys to actually read or if you can actually make out all of what you're seeing. Let me know. But it's small. But EA, is it legible? Like, can you read it? Like, can you see that the Hogs are at the top, the Aviators, the Black Knights, the Bulls? So just taking a quick look at the standings, right? The Hogs are 6-0, the Aviators 5-0, Black Knights 5-1, Bulls 5-1, Armadillos 5-1, Sentinels 4-1. Let's make the cutoff right there for no particular reason. Those are the teams that should be looking to potentially add players because they're in a position to win. And I would even say those particular teams should be way more aggressive and way more buyers at the trade deadline than normal. And I say that because when you look at those teams, you're looking at teams that traditionally we're not talking about powerhouses. Traditionally, we're not talking about teams that are in contention to win a Relo Bowl, right? I don't know if we've ever mentioned the Hogs as a Relo Bowl contender, ever. The Aviators, a couple years ago, maybe. That's, the Black Knights, not really. The Bulls, they had a good run last year, but, the Armadillos, no. The Sentinels, maybe a few years back. And then the Diablos and the Desperados, okay, fine. But you've got a list of about 6 teams at the top right there that are not perennial powerhouses. And so those teams find themselves in a position where, holy crap, I'm not normally in this spot. I'm going to go at it. I got a chance to win now. I got a chance to win the Relo Bowl. I don't care what you say. I know I said last week the Hogs are overachieving and they can't sustain this. But to that point, that is all the more reason why they should be buyers. They should be going out and trying to make a move to help solidify them so they can sustain this. Listen, they're not winning games because of Ronnie football. That's not the reason that they're winning. They're winning because of their defense, and they're winning because of Dre Shivers. That's not really opinion. That's just fact. You can look at the numbers. You can watch the games. And so are they going to make a trade to acquire a veteran quarterback? Probably not. But should they? Maybe. Right? Like, we've seen the Voyagers bench Glenn Hay. We know that Jabri Jackson, his time with the Gunners is coming up. Why not? Why not pick up the phone? Why not call the Voyagers and be like, hey, hey, Glenn Hay, what's his deal? Because now if you take a guy like Glenn Hay or you take a guy like Jabri Jackson and you put them on the Hogs with Dre Shivers and that defense, now they got a chance potentially to solidify themselves as a real contender. And I know that that's probably not a popular opinion because Ronnie Shanahan is there, and let's let him develop and let's let him, earn those XP and upgrade and all that. But he's not the reason why they're winning. And you could make an argument that if they start losing, he would be the reason that they start losing. So if you have the opportunity to go out and get a guy for relatively cheap, I don't know how much the Voyagers are going to ask for Glenn Hay when he's now their backup quarterback. Like, I don't think you're going to have to give up a first-round pick for a guy that they're going to sit on their bench. Maybe a first-round pick at most. Jabri Jackson, you don't have to give up a first-round pick to get him. In no world is Jabri Jackson worth a first-round pick. They're not going to re-sign him. I think he's there this year and next year. But the Gunners are out of it. They are 1-4 right now. Like, they're not really playing for anything. And maybe they think that they still have a chance, but I mean, realistically, I'm worried about our shot, and we're 2-4. And we're in second place in our division. So when I look at the team like the Gunners, why not float out Jabri Jackson? When I look at the team like the Voyagers, why not float out a name like Glenn Hay? And if you're a team like the Hogs, why not pick up that phone and make that phone call? And that's just one example, guys. There's a lot of teams there. I mentioned the teams at the top, but again, if I scroll back down to the bottom, the same thing can be said with the Cougars, right? The Cougars have already started to do exactly what I'm talking about. They've already started to get rid of some of their high talent players, right? They've already gotten rid of Markel Wilcox. They got draft capital. The Marshals, and I'll get into this with Coach Hodge in a minute, the first thing that he did when he came on board was update his trade block. Why did he do that? I'll tell you why he did it. Because his team is 0-6, and he understands exactly what I'm saying. I promise you, I'll ask him this question because he's going to be on in a couple minutes here. I will ask him the question, do you subscribe to the Kris Dunn theory of running your franchise? Do you believe what I just said? I promise you he's going to say yes. He literally showed it. The first thing he did was he looked at his roster. He looked at his record. He projected, he predicted where his franchise was going to be between now and the end of the year. And he said, you know what? I'm going to start looking towards the future. So if you look at the Marshals and their trade block, there's some ballers on the trade block. They've got a running back who's an 81 overall, a tight end that's an 86 overall. They've got two strong safeties on the trade block. Both of them are above 80. One of them is an 84. Both of them are under the age of 30. One of them is 26 years old. Right? Like, there's a 26-year-old, 81 overall strong safety on the trade block out there. There's probably 12 to 15 teams in the league where that would be an upgrade for them. or it would certainly solidify some depth to a team that was making a run. Again, if you're one of those teams at the top and you're worried about the back end of your secondary, there's a pair of 81 plus overall guys that are on the trade block. And that's just from one team. That's just from the DC Marshals. And so I know, I feel like you guys are probably like, Dunn, you talk about the trades and the trade deadline all the time, because I just don't think people utilize it the way that they should. I think there is, so here's another example. Kazim Cash. Kazim Cash is a running back on the Snowhawks. He has been put on the trade block. He's unhappy with his playing time, right? Smitty recently put Kazim Cash on the trade block. So when I go and look, why can't I find the Snowhawks here? When I go to the Snowhawks, right, and I look at their roster, you can understand why Kazim Cash might not be happy with his playing time. You can understand why the Snowhawks might not be playing Kazim Cash. He's currently third on the depth chart. Now, I would make the argument, why did you draft him in the first place, right? Like when you have a 24-year-old, 26-year-old, like when you have, why would you make that move in the first place? But regardless, teams draft players for umpteen numbers of reasons, right? That's not for me to decide. But I get it. I understand Kazim Cash being on the trade block. What I don't understand is teams not trying to get him. Because inevitably, here's what's going to happen. Less than a year from now, in 6 to 8 months, we are going to have running backs that get drafted. Yeah, Pecan brings up a good point, and he's 100% right. The reason he was drafted is because the former GM of the Snowhawks wanted everyone to be users. So he was, just wanted user after user after user. And a lot of coaches are like that. Honestly, I am 90% like that. I would much rather have users. You have to have a good balance of generics, right? Because otherwise I never have any input on upgrading my guys. If all I have are users, well, then I don't ever get to upgrade anybody because they're all dependent on being upgraded by the user. So you look at Kazim Cash. He is 22 years old and he's a 75 overall. Now, I go back to the draft because I promise you we're going to get to the draft next year and we're going to have probably 3 running backs selected in the first 2 rounds of the draft. Usually we get a running back taken in the first round. We don't often get 2 running backs taken in the first round. Typically it's like 1 running back in the first round and then probably 2 running backs or more in the second round, depending on the quality of the draft class. But inevitably, we're looking at, I would venture to guess 3 running backs are going to be selected in the first 2 rounds. And those 3 running backs, one of them, maybe 2 of them, will be a 75 overall. And I pause because to me, what said drives home the point that I'm about to make, but I don't think it is as clear to other people. Why on earth? Because let me tell you right now, Kazim Cash on the trade block is not going to garner a first round pick. If there's a team out there that is looking to get younger at the running back position, they could make an offer for Kazim Cash right now, and they would not have to give up their first round pick. There's just no way. Like you can't have your third string running back and be asking for a first round pick. I don't care if he's 22. I don't care if he's already 75. He's also normal dev, right? Like you're not going to get that. The Snowhawks are not going to get a first round pick for Kazim Cash. So why would you give up a first round pick and take a running back in next year's draft when you can have a running back right now for significantly less that is going to be basically the same thing, right? Like, that's the point that I'm trying to make. And I don't think that enough people realize that. You could probably acquire Kazim Cash right now for a 3rd round pick and a 4th round pick. Maybe you'd have, I don't think you'd have to give up a 2nd. But you certainly wouldn't have to give up a 1st. And you could make the argument that given playing time next season, compare Kazim Cash to the first 3 running backs that are taken in the draft and tell me who has the better season. And I'm willing to bet that there's a pretty good chance Kazim Cash would have a better season than those first 3 running backs taken. Again, it's all dependent on where they get drafted. But I don't understand why, if you're the team, and I guess I'm talking to you, general manager of a team that is going to take a running back in the 1st round next year. Why didn't you acquire Kazim Cash? Why didn't you try to acquire him right now for less than a 1st round pick and then use that 1st round pick at another area that could benefit and help your team? And it's little things like that I don't think everyone understands. And so we're a week and a half away from the trade deadline. It remains to be seen whether or not we're going to have more trades. I would like to think that we will. I'm always wheeling and dealing. I hope that, if nothing else, something that comes away from these, these monologues and these rants that I go on about trades and the trade deadline and running a franchise, if nothing else, I hope it leads to more conversations like that. I hope, if nothing else, somebody out there says, you know what, he's kind of right. Why don't I pick up the phone and see what it would take to get Kazim Cash? Because then I could use my 1st round pick next year and get a linebacker or get a quarterback or get a defensive end. And then I don't have to get that running back. And maybe Kazim Cash is that running back for my future. He's still got 3 years left on his contract. So it's not like you have to worry about re-signing him for, a lot of money. He's still playing on his rookie contract. So I hope, if nothing else, like, these conversations lead to more of those conversations. But I don't know. It remains to be seen. Again, the trade deadline is either going to be March 7th or March 8th. And we'll have to wait and see what happens. That's what it's going to be. But I'm going to move on. So I know I teased this a little bit at the beginning of the show. There's a new man in town in DC. The DC Marshals have a new head coach, and he goes by the name of Darrius Hodge, and he joins me now on Miners Live. It looks like from the car. I don't know. Did you just leave the office? Like, what is happening right now?
Yeah, I had to go back in for a minute right quick, and I just left back out. And I'm about 30 minutes from home, and it took a while to get home, so I'm like, you know what, I'm going to do it right here in the car.
Oh, I'm sorry. If I didn't realize that you were sitting in the parking lot, I would have tried to get you on a little bit earlier. So, but I appreciate you coming on. Obviously, congratulations on the new gig. Congratulations on joining the brotherhood of head coach. You probably heard me talk about the, recognizing your trade block and immediately coming in and getting to work right away.
Oh yeah.
I guess let's go back to the very beginning. When did you, I guess, identify within yourself that you wanted to be a coach in the league?
Okay. Well, let me just say this. It's about time, because I've been on the fence about coaching for about 2-3 years now.
Okay. So a while.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. No, I always got these ideas in my head. I'm always doing a bunch of, streams myself with different teams and all that. I'm just thinking like, okay, maybe I want to try this, or giving suggestions. I think like you and Mix was on, and you guys talked about it. Like, if you want to give all these suggestions, you want to do this and that, why not be a coach?
Right.
You have that free reign. So it's just like, I've been on the fence about it for so long. I'm like, you know what? It's time. It's time to just try it out.
Did you have any, did you know right away that you wanted to take the Marshals job? I guess what opportunities were presented? Like, was this the only head coaching position that was available to you, or did you have, a couple maybe that you could have chosen from? I don't expect you to tell me, oh, I chose the Marshals instead of, ABC team, but were there other teams that were available to you if you wanted to?
Yes, they were. Committee actually gave me the option, like, okay, which team you want to coach, and like, if he wasn't gonna, I knew he wasn't gonna give me like a team with a winning record right off the bat. But what made me pick the Marshals is them not having any wins at the moment.
Sure.
Come in, fresh coach. I wasn't given any wins yet, so any wins that come this season will be under me at the helm.
Yeah, you earned them. You earned them, right?
Yeah, that's 100% why I chose the Marshals. And
yeah, I think there's something to be said about that, and I think that goes a long way to kind of the person that you are as an individual, and that will obviously be conveyed as a coach, but also as a community member and, a great person for the RFL as a whole. I've probably never said this to you in this type of setting, but I've said it before. And I guess I if I've said it before, then I owe it to you to say this to you here right now in front of you. I think that you're one of the best people that the RFL has in its community. I think you're great for the community. I think you're great for the league. And when I see people like that, I think it's great for them to take that next step. Now, you obviously taking over the Marshals, do I think that there are one or two or maybe three other community members out there that could potentially take over teams? Yes, I absolutely do. Do they want to? Do they have that same desire that clearly you have? I don't know. That remains to be seen. A lot of people just like being their player and they don't want the pressures of being a head coach. So speaking on the pressures of being a head coach, first thing you do, throw players on the trade block. First thing I noticed about your trade block is you have Darrius Hodge, wide receiver, on your trade block. So walk me through that. Like, what are you expecting to get in a potential trade? Are you going to be asking for more because it's your own player? Like, why do you want to get rid of that player? And walk me through that whole decision to basically put your own created player, wide receiver Darrius Hodge, on the trade block.
Okay, I knew you were gonna touch on this one. So, I'm just looking at the situation, right? Like, Kaishan, he's been active. He's wants to get on the field. They're trying him out in the slot. We've seen good things in the slot out of Kaishan. So that drops, Darrius Hodge, my receiver, down to wide receiver 4. And, a 22-year-old, 76 overall star dev, he can have some value. Like, he's not going to really be on the field as much for us, but he can have some value maybe to someone else in the trade. So, yeah, definitely, like, what did you call it? The Kris Dunn's the theory?
Yeah. Do you subscribe to the Kris Dunn theory?
I 100% subscribe to it. But
I told you guys. See, I knew. I read his mind. I told you he was. As soon as I saw the trade block, literally within hours after the announcement that he was taking over as the head coach in DC, it was literally within hours. And I know that you guys all in the community don't have privy to all of that information, but I promise you it was within hours of the announcement that the Marshals had already updated the trade block. And I mean, the first thing that I noticed was, wow, he put his own player on the trade block. Like, I wonder what that's going to look like. So you mentioned the wide receiver room, and Kyshawn Williams playing well. He's 22 years old. He's a 74 overall. I think more than anything, the carrying stat here with him is he's got 97 speed, right? Like a guy who's young and has burners. That's a good guy to have on your roster. So yes, can I understand you wanting to get him more playing time? Absolutely. Was there ever any thought to, because the other guys that are in the room, Sean Acosta, he's 25 years old. Devin Flores, he's 26 years old. They are I guess you would call them the old heads in the room, because when you look at the wide receiver core that you have, those are the elder statesmen. I would never refer to a 25-year-old or a 26-year-old as an old head, but they are the veterans in that locker room. Rather than putting the 22-year-old Darrius Hodge on the trade block, did you have any, was there ever any thought given to maybe trying to move Devin Flores or Sean Acosta, knowing that you could probably get more in return for them, because Acosta's an 85, Flores is an 81. Was that ever a thought in your mind at all?
It did become a thought in my mind for a little bit, but I'm like, these are like the main guys here. I think because we don't really have too much. That roster team isn't that bad. Okay, they lost 3 games this year by 3 points in each game. Each game could have went either way.
Sure.
So I'm looking at I still want those guys around here, maybe for a few years or two, see what we can do with them. Whereas, if I got a guy on the field, Darrius Hodge, he's not going to be on the field as much. To see what I can get for him. And, like you said, within hours of updating the trade block, it might have been sooner than hours, but right after the committee said I can be the coach, I was already deep diving the roster. Okay, what can I do with this? What can I do with that? I love the Kris Dunn's. I forgot the name of it, but I definitely subscribe to it.
Well, I appreciate it, because sometimes I feel like, I'm on an island, and, I look at the chat every now and then, and I'm like, boy, no one is really buying into this. Like, I feel like more often than not, I go to the chat and I find people coming at me for something that I said. And I'm like, how do you not understand this? Like, why wouldn't you be looking at things this way?
No, as a coach, it gets to a point. It's hard to make that decision as a coach. You just have to suck up your pride, look at the roster, realize the reality of the situation, and start thinking about the future.
Yeah, and listen,
that's a tough decision. That can be a tough decision as a coach to make, and then you'll have to part ways with a long-time veteran who's been on the team a while. That can definitely be tough for a coach to do, but you gotta just suck up that pride and realize.
Right, you can't have too much pride in this. You can have a certain amount of pride, right? Like I try not to get too emotional or too defensive, but at the end of the day, you guys, I feel like to a certain extent know me, and I'm sort of no nonsense. I kind of wear my heart on my sleeve. I am passionate about the things that I'm passionate about. And if I have an opinion, you're probably going to hear it. And if it's a strong opinion, then you're going to hear it over and over and over. Right. And that's kind of who I am. But at the end of the day, you're 100% right. I had to sit down at the table and say to myself, I'm about to trade a guy that is on the Mount Rushmore of Sacramento Miners. And what does that mean? And is this the right move to make? And then I had to go to the locker room and basically explain to the locker room, hey guys, here's what's happening. It's not official yet, but it might become official by the end of today. Buck Ulbrich is leaving, and sometimes that doesn't go over well, right? Sometimes you go to locker room of guys, it's like, wait a minute, you're trading away our best wide receiver? Like, you never really know how that's going to go. And so I completely get it. You have to swallow your pride for sure. What were you saying?
I said, how long was Buck there?
So Buck's, I believe, been with the franchise his entire career. So the Sacramento Miners used to be the Mexico City Conquistadors. And that was in season 6, I believe. So seasons 1 through 6, they were the Mexico City Conquistadors. And then I took over. No, season 5. I took over, and my first year was season 6. And so season 6, 7, and 8, we were the Miners, right? Yeah, because we won back-to-back division titles. So 6, 7, and 8, we won the division, and now we're in season 9. So I'm pretty sure Buck was there from day one. He was an OG Mexico City Conquistador. Same thing with Chum Lee. And I had to make the difficult decision a couple of years ago with Chum Lee when I traded Chum Lee away. You have to, you said it best, right? You have to swallow your pride sometimes and just be like, I'm making this decision. I think that this is in the best interest of the team. However, 1 or 2 years from now, I might look like an idiot. Or 1 or 2 years from now, I might look like a genius. And you have to be willing to accept those extremes. You're never going to be successful. If there's one piece of advice that I can give you, right? If there's one piece of advice that I can give you and anyone else out there that's thinking about joining the coaching ranks or any of the coaches that are out there right now, if you're not willing to be made to look like a fool, then you're not willing to do what it takes to win. Because
it comes with the job.
There's always going to be those scenarios. You're always going to make one move and you're like, oh my God, this was amazing. This was like the best move ever. We're so well positioned because I made this move. But then the following year, you might make a different move and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I got rid of that guy. Perfect example right now. I traded away Chum Lee 2 years ago. Look at what Chum Lee is doing right now with the Armadillos. It's very easy. It's very easy for someone to look at that and say, wow, Dunn, you're an idiot. You traded away Chum Lee and look at him balling out right now in Austin. Now, again, I made that trade for the long term, and this is still kind of short term, but you have to be willing to make the decisions that are potentially going to make you look great or potentially make you look like an idiot. And to your point about swallowing your pride, that's just what it is. You have to be willing to do that.
Yeah, and that's what separates the good GMs from the great GMs. The willingness to take those risks, to go for it all. Just like you were saying about the teams at the top, right? That are like on the cusp of a reload bowl.
Right.
You gotta, as a GM, you gotta be willing to, make that one move, maybe get an added piece at the deadline that could put you over the top to get to that reload bowl.
Right. Like I know, and I said this, it's probably an unpopular opinion, but I threw out the Cincinnati Hogs, right? Ronnie Shanahan is the future at quarterback. But Ronnie Shanahan got the starting job. And when you gave Ronnie Shanahan the starting job, you were not anticipating the team to be undefeated. You were not anticipating them to have the best record in the league. And unfortunately, the trade deadline is week 8, and there are 10 weeks after that. And a lot can happen in that 10-week stretch. And so for me, and I don't know if you would subscribe to this theory as well, I would rather bring on that veteran quarterback as added insurance than run the risk of getting past the trade deadline and then getting to weeks 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Now all of a sudden the Hogs are struggling a little bit. They lose 4 or 5 games over their next 8 or 9. And while they might still make the playoffs, now they're just not, where they were. They're not what we thought they could be. Whereas maybe they could have gone out and got Glenn Hay. Maybe they could have gone out and got Jabri Jackson. I think those are probably the top 2 names that if I were to look at potential quarterbacks that could be on the move, I think those are probably they're definitely the first 2 that come to mind. And I mean, no disrespect. Ronnie Shanahan knows that I'm a fan, but again, you talk about swallowing your pride. Ronnie Shanahan would have to swallow his pride a little bit for this season. But if it meant bringing in a guy like Glenn Hay to help him, who's probably got mentor, who's going to help him develop and help the team win, like Ronnie Shanahan being the starting quarterback, yes, he's going to get more XP and he's going to develop. But you know what else is going to be a lot of XP? If you win the Relo Bowl, when you win the whole damn thing, you get a lot of XP. You get a nice little boost. Right.
Well,
and so
here's the thing. Why you want to keep Ronnie as the quarterback for the season.
Okay. So you don't agree. You think let it roll with Ronnie regardless.
I think because right now he has normal dev. I believe he has normal dev. So like he keeps having this type of season. At the end of the year, he's gonna get that star dev. That's why part of me I don't agree with it, because you don't want to stunt that growth if he has the potential to get that star dev.
But what if they lose 6 of their next 11 games and they don't make the playoffs?
That's another thing. So if you want to bring in one of those veteran presence, I wouldn't say start them over Ronnie. I just
you don't have to start him right away, but at least you have him. Yeah. I hope don't get it twisted. Like,
yeah, I'm just making sure, guys. Everyone.
Yeah, like I would bring in. I would 100% if the cost to acquire a guy like Glenn Hay or Jabri Jackson was a couple mid-round picks. Like if I could get, I would probably, even if I were the Hogs, would I give up a 2nd round pick to get Glenn Hay as some insurance? Possibly. Right. Ideally I'd like to try to get him for maybe a 3rd and another player, or maybe a 3rd, a 4th and another player, maybe not have to give up a 1st or a 2nd, because again, they're aging, they're veterans, and like I respect all of that, but you're not, you can't ask me for a 1st round pick for a quarterback that's 32, 33, 34 years old and is likely to walk as soon as he becomes a free agent. Like, I'm not going to let you replace a guy that you're going to lose in 1 year with a guy that you now get to keep for 4 years. And as is a younger guy that you could resign and have forever. Like, I'm not willing to do that. And I don't think anybody else would. But could you bring in one of those veteran guys? And maybe it doesn't even have to be that caliber. Maybe there's other guys, right? Like if Glenn Hay and Jabri Jackson are the top tier, right? Then who are the 2nd tier of quarterbacks that could be available? And maybe you go out and you get one of those guys, and all you have to give up is a round 4 and a round 5 pick. And you get that insurance. And then you've got them on the roster. And then come week 10, Ronnie Shanahan throws a dud and they lose. Then week 11, oh my God, they lose again. Now the morale's coming down. Now the attributes are playing down. And now maybe you say, you know what? Let's give him a breather. We've got this guy that we can put in. And maybe he can at least stop the bleeding and right the ship. And again, all of it is conjecture. Everything could go a different way. But I just think there's something to be said about the idea of bringing in some level of insurance. Right. And again, I just use the Hogs as an example because they're the best record. They're the best team in the league right now. And they have a rookie quarterback. Right.
Yeah, that's what your concern is. I think your concern is, can Ronnie keep this play up for a 17-game season?
Well, no, I think my concern is that he does keep this play up and the defense and the running game don't. Like, Ronnie Shanahan isn't the reason that they're winning games. If Ronnie Shanahan does Ronnie Shanahan things the rest of the season, they're going to lose a handful of games unless the defense continues to be stellar and Shivers continues to be a top 3 or top 5 back in the league. Like, I understand that Shanahan can develop and he can get better and all of those things can happen. But I worry again. This isn't me saying Ronnie Shanahan's not good. He's the future of that organization.
But
I would just
give up insurance at what cost do you
well, exactly. And that's the point. And to the conversation about swallowing your pride a little bit and being willing to make a move that could potentially make you look dumb or make you look like a genius. You have to be willing to make that decision. And ultimately, I don't know what that decision is, right? Like, but those are the decisions that have to be made. And you'll learn that real quick, right? Those are the decisions that you're just going to have to make. Are you willing to give up if the cost was a second round pick? If you're the Hogs, it's probably a mid to late round second round pick. So you're talking about, are you willing to give up the 50th player in the draft, the fifth, somewhere between 45 and 60? Are you willing to give up somewhere between the 45th and the 60th player in the draft? Whatever that might be. Are you willing to give that up in order to go out and get some insurance to help you win the Real Bowl right now? And yes, that's a tough decision.
I'll learn it quick. The trade on the corner. All I say is stay tuned. Stay tuned. Marshals, we might be making some moves. Just stay tuned.
Oh, Smitty brought up a good point. I didn't realize that Jabri Jackson just re-signed this offseason. I thought that Jabri Jackson had re-signed last year. So Jabri Jackson, because he just re-signed his contract, he has to at least play out well. But is it a multi-year deal? If it's a 1-year deal, he shouldn't have to. But it's not. I don't think it's a 1-year deal. I think it's a multi-year deal. So say if you re-sign a 1-year deal, I used to be able to get rid of him at the trade deadline if you're 0-5 or 1-5 or 0-6. We certainly shouldn't be forcing guys to keep aging veterans on a team that's 0 in their lifetime.
Yeah, and they're sitting at 1-4. They're right on that cusp where it might be tie-on time.
Right, and that's the thing. You already have the guy there. Like, there was conversation last year when Jabri Jackson went into free agency. There was conversation of, are they going to re-sign him or are they going to let him go? And if I'm being honest, I think what ultimately happened was the Gunners weren't willing to trade him in season 8. They weren't willing to trade him at the deadline, right? Because they probably felt like they had a decent team and they didn't want to, in certain terms, give up on the season by trading away Jabri Jackson. And so you keep him and you hope that you can make a run. But then ultimately what happens is you then get to the end of the year and now you have to either re-sign a guy for a lot of money that isn't really the future, or you let him walk and you get absolutely nothing. And so nobody wants to get nothing in return, right? Like, nobody ever wants to get nothing for a player. So what do? Ultimately, you re-sign him for a smaller contract and you just keep him around. And ultimately, I think that's what ended up happening with the Gunners. I think it backfired. I mean, I could probably say clearly it backfired. Should the Gunners, in hindsight, have traded Jabri Jackson before the deadline of week 8? Yeah, I think so. And I think that they would, if you were the Gunners, you would probably agree. In hindsight, I wish that we moved on and we just let Tyon take over the reins, because at what did you say, 1-4 right now in the standings?
1-4, I believe they are. Yeah.
Yeah. Right now the Gunners are 1-4. Was Tyon going to be worse than that? So it's difficult. But again, kind of the theme of this whole show tonight is swallowing your pride and being willing to make those difficult decisions. And ultimately, that was a difficult decision that the Gunners were just not willing to make. And I get it. Inevitably, every single one of us, we're probably there right now. And if we're not there right now, we're going to be there between now and March 7th. We're going to have to make up our minds on whether or not we want to move on from a guy. I already did it with Buck Ulbrich, right? You could look at Baker and the Voyagers. He kind of did it, even though he didn't trade Glenn Hay. He benched him, right? Like, that's kind of the equivalent. I mean,
that's the
benching. I'd rather trade the guy, because at least if I trade the guy, I get something in return. Benching him, you get nothing in return, and he's just sitting there on your bench. What are you going to say?
I said that's the start of it. Yeah, benching him. But how old is Glenn Hay? 33, 34?
I want to say he's 33. Pull up the Voyagers real quick. I mean, they're 2-3 right now. Well, actually, I think they're 3-3. They got the win last night. So that gets them back to 500. And you've got Glenn Hay, who's on the block. He's 34 years old, right? But you're talking about a guy. So he's 34 years old. Yes, that's old. And because he's 34 years old, he's not giving up a first round pick. Like no one, he can't. If you were to ask Baker, what are you realistically expecting in return for Glenn Hay? He would probably love to get a first round pick, but I don't think he's realistically expecting to get a first round pick. He's there for 2 more years. So he's got 2 years left. So he will be 36 years old. For my money, and again, this is just me, and everybody's different. And I see Smitty a lot of times in the chat, like commenting on things that I'm saying, like, kind of like defending certain teams and their positions. It is just me. Like everything is all kind of, if it were me, right? Like Smitty has a lot of difficult decisions to make because unfortunately for him, he's overseeing and running a lot of teams. You and I only have to worry about one. He has to worry about a bunch. Do I feel like sometimes that is a detriment? Yeah, I think it's difficult for him to do that. It's a lot. In a perfect world, I think he would tell you we would have 28 user coaches and, maybe he only had to worry about 3 or 4. Or maybe he wouldn't have to worry about any. In a perfect world, he wouldn't have to worry about any, and he could just be the commissioner of the league, and every team had a user coach. But for my money, Glenn Hay is going to be on the Voyagers for 2 more years, or he's going to get traded. And if the Voyagers are going to stick with Monte Wyatt, then I don't know what the point is of having Glenn Hay on the roster.
Who had a great game yesterday. Let me say that. Monte Wyatt. Yeah.
I mean, the Voyagers, I believe they've won twice with Monte Wyatt as the quarterback. And
Steamers and Cougars. Yes.
So Monte Wyatt has led them to 2 victories in, I think, 3 weeks, and Glenn Hay led them to 1. Right now, I'm not comparing Glenn Hay to Monte Wyatt, but Monte Wyatt is the future. Glenn Hay made them a perennial contender. Glenn Hay helped mold the Houston Voyagers franchise into what it is today. And what it is today is what many of us would refer to as an RFL powerhouse, an RFL blue blood, if you will.
Yeah.
And I think I think what we're seeing with Glenn Hay this year is similar to what we kind of saw with Jabari Jackson, I guess, last year, right? Like, is there a team out there that's going to pick up the phone and call Baker? Or is Baker going to pick up the phone and reach out to some of those teams and say, hey, what are your thoughts on Glenn Hay? What do you say? I just may trade him to the Bay.
Yeah, it's going to be difficult. Like, it would have to be a team. I would think it would have to be a team that is on the cusp of a reload bowl, and they either lost their quarterback or something. I can't really think of any team. You'll have to go back to what you were saying about the Hogs possibly getting him as insurance, but again, at what cost? not a first round pick, a third round pick, a fourth round pick, maybe. If you're Baker, do you want to just get something for him instead of not getting nothing for him? Like,
yeah, I think the answer to that question is yes. I don't know anyone that would say no. And normally you would say no simply because you don't want to give up on the season, but you've already benched him. Right. So,
yeah.
It's interesting. It's interesting. But yeah, we'll see. I know we got the game coming up, Hodge. I'm going to let you out of here, and then I'm going to do real quick, just kind of go over a couple things, and we'll get you guys out of here. But Hodge, appreciate you coming on. Congratulations on the gig, and look forward to future battles on the field, and who knows, maybe we can work a trade one day.
Definitely. Like, I got so many emotions just going through me now. That when Smitty said, "Okay, you can go ahead and get the job," all these emotions going through. I'm excited. I'm ready. I'm just ready. I'm talking with my guys. They're excited. There's going to be some new things you're going to see out of the Marshals.
Love it. Well, appreciate you taking the time. I know a busy day, obviously sitting in the car. So thanks for coming on. We'll talk soon. And, good luck. Good luck the rest of the way.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Take care, man. Darrius Hodge, head coach now of the DC Marshals. So I'm going to get you guys out of here in a minute because I know we got the first of the doubleheader games tonight. And I wanted to just go over real quick a couple boomer buster, right? Like I like to go over these boomer buster guys with you. And last week, Timmy Merritt for the Bulldogs was an absolute buster. 194 yards passing, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. He now leads the RFL in interceptions. He's got 12 on the year. The Bulldogs have lost 3 games in a row. And in that 3-game stretch, Timmy Merritt has thrown 5 interceptions. So congratulations, Timmy Merritt. You have found yourself busted. On the flip side of things, I'm going to throw out a name here, guys, that you might not even know of. And that is San Jose Condors defensive end Kevin Kudon. 4.5 sacks last week against the LA Crusaders. He leads the RFL with 11.5 sacks on the season. And if he were to play a 17-game stretch, he's on pace for 39 sacks. He missed week 2 this year, and he leads the league, having only played 5 games. So 11.5 sacks in only 5 games played. Congratulations, Kevin Kudon and the San Jose Condors. You, my friend, had yourself a hell of a week. Again, 4.5 sacks against the LA Crusaders. So there is your boomer and buster for the week. Again, if you guys have a name, a nominee that you'd like to throw out there for potential boomer or buster, let me know. And lastly, before I get you guys out of here, you may have seen that a little bit earlier on this evening, I put a poll in the chat for Love It or Shove It. And I said the Armadillos quarterback Chum Lee will win the MVP. Love it or shove it. The results came in. 83% of you said shove it. So 83% of you said no, Chum Lee will not win the MVP. And if you're saying Chum Lee is not going to win the MVP, then feel free to throw in the chat who you think will win the MVP. Geno Gannon's name is probably going to be circled out by a lot of people. Marquise Washington certainly is a name that a lot of people are going to look at. Those are 2 of the names that I think should be front runners. So again, 83% of you said shove it to Chum Lee winning the MVP. And then the other love it or shove it that I had for you guys, this was kind of a fun one. The Chicago Cougars will win a game, because right now they're 0-6, before the St. Louis Aviators or the Cincinnati Hogs lose a game. The Cougars will win before the Aviators or Hogs lose. And that was actually a 50-50 split. You guys were split right down the middle. 50% of you said, yeah, love it. The Cougars will win a game before the Aviators or the Hogs lose. Basically a credit to the Aviators and the Hogs and how they're not going to lose. Or the other 50% of you said, shove it. You think that the Cougars have no chance of winning and the Aviators or Hogs have a better chance of losing before the Cougars do of winning. So those of you that said shove it, not a big fan of the Cougars maybe. And those of you that love it, certainly think that maybe the Cougars can turn things around a little bit quickly. So again, guys, love it or shove it. I'll try to be a little bit better, get those polls out for you guys so that you can have them before the show goes on, and I can give you that those percentage breakdowns. Thanks again to Coach Hodge, the newest member of the RFL Coaching Brethren, for coming on and sitting down with me. He is, again, the newest head coach of the DC Marshals. And with that, I'm going to get out of here, guys. Let you go and check out RFL all night. We've got a doubleheader tonight. Be sure to check out the Huskies game. And until next time, I am your host, head coach and general manager of the Sacramento Miners, Kris Dunn, wishing you all a great evening. Enjoy the games. And until next time, take care, everybody.